The Galactic Joint Forces Academy doesn't just train warriors, it perfects them. 847 years of military excellence across 63 species. Every protocol refined. Every test calibrated. Every safety margin triple-checked by committees who take their work very, very seriously. Which is why what happened with Marcus Trent shouldn't have been possible. I'm telling you this story because it's been 6 months since the incident. The investigation reports are finally public, and I've been specifically authorized to share what the Academy's PR department is calling a learning opportunity about human integration challenges. What they mean is, we let a human into the standardized strength evaluation with inadequate supervision, and he accidentally proved that 2 centuries of engineering best practices were actually engineering good enough practices. This is also the story of how one average human with a gym membership managed to fail a strength test, pass 3 engineering certifications he didn't know existed, and force the Academy to add a new regulation that specifically says, no touching the calibration anchor in 72 languages. 71 of those translations were already in our system. We added human. English last. For Marcus Trent specifically. Let me explain. The SSE, because military institutions are legally required to make everything an acronym, has been the Academy's physical assessment standard since 2738. 5 phases. Each phase tests different muscle groups across different species physiologies. We've got weights calibrated for everyone from the Gossamer Collective, whose idea of heavy lifting is a strong opinion, to the Carthonian heavy welders who were born in 3.2 gravities and think atmosphere is for the weak. It's a good test, fair test, scientific test. The kind of test that works perfectly unless someone starts asking questions like, but why is it designed this way? Which is exactly the kind of question humans excel at. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Phase 1 through 4, progressive resistance training. Lift heavier weights with proper form. We've got spotters, medical teams, trauma counselors for species that take failure personally. Standard stuff. Phase 5, the calibration anchor. Now, the anchor isn't technically part of the test. It's a 15 metric ton block of reinforced durasteel that serves as the 0-point reference for every gravimetric sensor in the facility. At the end of testing, each cadet attempts to lift it. Each cadet fails. We measure how much they failed by. Usually somewhere between 0.001 and 0.3% movement, and use that data to verify our sensors are properly calibrated. In 217 years, the anchor has never moved more than 4 millimeters. That record belongs to a Carthonian named Kresh, who achieved 3.8 millimeters before her skeleton started making sounds that medical staff describe as musically distressing. The anchor has warning, labels, safety barriers, a dedicated maintenance schedule that's been followed religiously since installation. What it apparently didn't have, and this is where the investigation gets interesting, was a properly centered mounting bracket. But Commander Volthar didn't know that at 0600 hours on the morning of Marcus Trent's evaluation. Nobody knew that, except, as it turned out, Marcus Trent, who pointed it out 30 seconds after walking into the testing bay. Marcus Trent arrived 2 hours early because he runs on what I've learned humans call coffee logic. The formula appears to be excessive caffeine plus anxiety about being late equals arriving early enough to watch the previous test group finish. He's average height for a human, which makes him short by Academy standards, where average is calculated across species that include the 12-foot draconids and the gaseous methalloids, who don't technically have height so much as volume of space occupied. Marcus has the build of what humans call a recreational lifter. 3 gym sessions per week, protein powder in his locker, a workout playlist that his roommate, Aquarine Crystalline named Zixith describes as auditory assault with motivational undertones. His classmates were already in the observation. Krell, a 4-armed Dravax who'd been bench pressing twice his body weight since age 7, and found humans fascinating in the way you find a species of prey animal that keeps approaching predators to make friends. Zixith, whose crystalline structure could absorb and redirect kinetic energy, which meant she didn't have muscles so much as harmonic resonance fibers, that the biology department was still filing disagreement papers about. Thune, a tripedal Volmer who'd already informed everyone that raw strength is a primitive metric, and that his species evolved superior persistence hunting, making them obviously better than everyone else's evolutionary path. And then Marcus, who walked in sipping something called a pre-workout from a bottle with a label that read "Extreme Pump" in letters that seemed medically inadvisable, did a few toe touches and gave everyone a thumbs up. "Morning!" His voice had that aggressively cheerful quality that some humans deploy before physical activity. "Beautiful day for some lifting, yeah?" Krell stared with all four eyes. "Human Marcus, you understand this evaluation has a 23% injury rate." "Oh, yeah. Got the briefing packet. Totally normal, though." "Back home, gym injury rates are like 45% if you count people who skip warm-ups and ego lift." He took another sip of his concerning beverage. "Plus all the people who drop weights on themselves, taking selfies. Your species injures themselves while documenting the activity? I mean, sometimes the selfie is why they get injured. Gotta get that pump pic, you know?" Thune's translator struggled with pump pic for 3 full seconds before giving up and rendering it as untranslatable. Human vanity ritual. This conversation was later referenced in Krell's incident report, under early warnings we should have heeded, alongside the observation that Marcus spent the wait time watching instructional videos on his datapad titled 5 Weird Tricks to Fix Your Deadlift. The word fix should have been a red flag. Commander Volthar administered the SSE with the enthusiasm of someone who'd done this exact test for 34 years and developed strong opinions about proper form. He was Traxian. 6 limbs, exoskeletal plating, and the personality of a technical manual that's disappointed in you. Cadet Trent. His translator rendered his clicking speech as flat, bureaucratic English. "You will complete 5 phases. You will use proper form. You will not attempt creative interpretation of equipment, facilities, or safety protocols." Marcus blinked. "That's really specific? Your species has a file. We've been at the Academy for 3 months. The file is 14 pages. It includes a footnote about furniture reassembly that required 6 pages of supplementary documentation. Phase 1. Light resistance, 40 kilograms, equivalent. Marcus approached the weight with the one confidence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times in Planet Fitness parking lots across Earth. Proper stance, good form, smooth lift, textbook execution. The observation deck went quiet. "Adequate?" Volthar noted, which from a Traxian was basically a standing ovation. Phase 2, moderate resistance, 95 kilograms. Marcus rolled his shoulders, approached, and lifted with the casual competence that comes from following a Bulgarian split squat program some guy named Greg posted on Reddit. Krell's eyes narrowed. The human exhibits proper posterior chain engagement. What does that mean? Zixith hummed. It means he knows what he's doing. But the database said humans were fragile endurance specialists with insufficient fast-twitch muscle fiber. The database, Thune observed, appears to have been compiled by xenobiologists who studied humans in sedentary environments. You mean they watched office workers? I mean they specifically studied human administrative staff and extrapolated physical capabilities from a population that considers taking the stairs an exercise event. In the control booth, 3 researchers were frantically updating humanity's strength baseline. By the end of the day, they'd update it 6 more times before just adding a note. Variable C individual assessment, do not generalize. Phase 3. Heavy resistance, 180 kilograms. This is where most species start showing strain. This is where the medical team gets ready. This is where cadets learn about their limitations. Marcus approached the weight, did a little hop that made Volthar's exoskeleton plates rattle with disapproval, and muttered something that sounded like hip hinge, neutral spine. Coach Ripito would be proud. He lifted it, not easily, not elegantly, with a grunt that echoed across the testing bay like a mating call for heavy objects. But he lifted it, held it for the required 3 count, and set it down with controlled precision. Okay. He exhaled hard. That one was actually heavy. The observation deck was silent except for the sound of Zixith's crystalline structure resonating at a frequency that indicated confusion. Did she, started? He did, Krell confirmed. But the calculations said the calculations were wrong. Phase 4, extreme resistance, 275 kilograms. This phase is meant to be at the edge of physiological possibility. Some species can't complete it. Those who do get flagged for advanced combat specialization. Marcus looked at the weight, looked at his hands, looked back at the weight. Yeah, okay, I've done this before. Different weight, same principle. He clapped his hands together, creating a sound that made everyone flinch. Just got to activate the glutes, engage the core, and remember that pain is just weakness leaving the body, which is something my high school coach used to yell and I'm pretty sure is medically inaccurate, but it's motivational, you know? He didn't wait for an answer. He approached, gripped, set his stance with the precision of someone who'd watched a lot of YouTube videos about biomechanics, and lifted. 6 seconds. His face turned a color that Thune's translator identified as concerning red, possible cardiovascular event. There was a popping sound from his knee that made the medical team start forward, but he lifted it, held it, 3 count, set it down without dropping it. Then he stood up, cracked his back with a sound like a cascade of small structural failures, and smiled. Okay, that was fun. What's next? In the control booth, a xenophysiologist was holding her head in her tendrils and making a sound that the translator gave up on, just adding despair to the transcript. Volthar checked his datapad, checked it again, as if the numbers might change if he looked harder. Cadet Trent, you just completed Extreme Tier. Cool. Is that good? Humans are rated as Category 4 strength on the Galactic Standard. Extreme Tier is calibrated for Category 7 and above. Marcus considered this. Maybe I should update my resume. Final phase, Volthar announced, his voice carrying the weight of someone who desperately wanted this evaluation to be over. The calibration anchor. He gestured with 2 of his 6 limbs toward the corner of the testing bay. The anchor sat on its reinforced platform, like a monument to institutional stability. 15 metric tons of durasteel alloy, covered in sensor arrays that glowed with soft blue light. Warning labels in 47 languages. Safety barriers. Calibration marks that had been meticulously maintained for 217 years. Every cadet attempts to lift the anchor, Volthar explained in the tone of someone reciting scripture. Every cadet fails. This is correct. This is expected. The anchor is not meant to be lifted. Your attempt provides calibration data for our gravimetric sensors. You will be measured on how much you failed by. Questions? Marcus walked over, still breathing hard from Phase 4. He circled the anchor slowly, hands on his hips, head tilted. That head tilt would later be identified in the investigation as the moment we should have stopped the evaluation. So we're supposed to try and fail? Marcus asked. Yes. And you use our failure as a data point? Correct. Marcus crouched down, peering at the base of the anchor. That's actually pretty smart, using consistent failure as a calibration constant. Good engineering. Volthar's exoskeleton plates shifted in what might have been pleasure at the compliment. He should have paid more attention to the word good instead of engineering, because Marcus was still looking at the base of the anchor with the expression humans get when they notice something is slightly wrong, and they can't help but point it out. Quick question, Marcus said. Every investigator who later reviewed this moment agreed. This is where Volthar should have said no questions and ended the evaluation immediately. Instead, he said, What? Why isn't this thing bolted down properly? The testing bay became very quiet, the kind of quiet that happens right before someone realizes their life is about to get significantly more complicated. What? Volthar said slowly. Do you mean properly? Is less than #0. 6 hashes greater than Marcus pointed at the base of the anchor with the confidence of someone who'd spent too many weekends helping friends move furniture and developed strong opinions about load distribution. See? You've got it sitting on these 4 support pillars, right? But look! He rapped his knuckles against the corner nearest him. The resulting sound was not the solid thunk of metal-on-metal contact. It was more of a thunk rattle that suggested there was space where there shouldn't be space. This corner's not flush with the platform. There's like a 2-centimeter gap, which means the weight's not distributing evenly across all 4 contact points. It's loading primarily onto these 3 points here, here, and here. He pointed as he spoke. And these mounting bolts, he examined one closely, are corroded, like significantly corroded. How old is this installation? 217 years, Volthar said. His translator added what might have been a quaver of concern. Okay, well, there's your problem. You've got thermal expansion over 2 centuries, environmental corrosion on the mounting hardware, and an uneven foundation that's been transferring load incorrectly the entire time. Marcus stood up, brushing his hands on his uniform. Honestly, I'm surprised it hasn't shifted on its own. The only thing keeping it stable is probably the sheer weight pressing down on the corroded points, which is creating a friction lock. But if you hit it from the right angle with the right leverage, he trailed off, looking at the anchor with the expression of someone solving a puzzle they didn't realize they were supposed to leave alone. Cadet Trent, Volthar said carefully. The anchor has been in this exact position for over 200 years. It has been tested by thousands of cadets across 63 species. It has never moved more than 4 millimeters. Right, because everyone's trying to lift it straight up against the gravity well. But if you account for the off-center weight distribution and use the corroded mounting as a pivot point, Marcus walked around to the opposite side. You could probably leverage it from here. Get underneath this corner, use the fulcrum principle, and the whole thing should tip pretty easily. Easily? I mean, it's still 15 tons, but like, hard but doable heavy, not impossible heavy. In the observation deck, Krell turned to Thune. Did the human just solve a structural engineering problem that no one knew existed? I think, Thune said slowly. The human doesn't realize there wasn't a problem to solve. Zixith's crystalline structure flickered with a light pattern that meant she was experiencing existential confusion. Should we stop him? Cadet Trent? Volthar's voice echoed across the testing bay. Do not. Marcus had already crouched down and gripped the underside of the anchor's corner. Attempt to lift it. Just want to see if I'm right about the leverage. Point, Marcus said cheerfully. He pulled. At first, nothing happened. Marcus adjusted his grip, shifted his feet 6 inches to the left. Tried again. The anchor made a sound, not a loud sound, just a small, grinding screech of metal moving against metal where metal hadn't moved in 217 years. Every alarm in the facility activated simultaneously. Seize activity, Volthar bellowed, but Marcus was already committed, because you can't stop a deadlift halfway through. That's how you herniate a disc. He shifted his stance, redistributed his weight with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd moved a lot of heavy furniture up a lot of narrow staircases, and pulled with a grunt that came from the specific place in the human body where determination lives right next to stubbornness. The anchor tilted, just a little, then a little more, then the corroded mounting bracket, which had been slowly degrading for 20 years, while passing every inspection because no one thought to check if something that was never supposed to move might eventually want to move, gave up. Its structural integrity, with a metallic screech, the anchor lifted, 6 inches off its base, then a foot, then Marcus, breathing hard, his face, the color that precedes either victory or a medical event, tilted the entire 15 metric ton block of Durasteel far enough to see the underside. Yep, he said, voice strained. Mounting bracket shot. Someone should really fix that before it becomes a safety hazard. He lowered it back down with surprising care. The anchor settled with a boom that rattled every sensor in the facility and triggered 6 different structural integrity alerts. Marcus stood up, cracked his back, rolled his shoulders, looked at Commander Volthar with genuine confusion. So, does that count as moving it? Because I feel like I should get at least a few millimeters for that. The testing bay was silent except for alarms and the sound of one Traxian commander's exoskeleton creaking as he tried to process what his 6 eyes had just witnessed. Then, very quietly, from the observation deck, "I want to go home," Pip whispered. What followed is documented in 17 incident reports, 43 safety reviews, and one emergency meeting of the Academy board that lasted 6 hours and consumed enough coffee to violate 3 species dietary restrictions. The engineering team descended on the Anchor like it had personally offended their ancestors. Scanners, sensors, calculations, increasingly distressed clicking in languages that don't translate well to English, but definitely mean, oh no. Their preliminary assessment, filed 37 minutes after the incident. The mounting system has experienced gradual degradation over approximately 22 years. Cadet Trent Human, Class 2847B, identified the structural failure through what he describes as just looking at it like you'd look at wobbly furniture. He then successfully displaced the Anchor using leverage, principles that, while mechanically sound, should not have been applied to calibration equipment. We recommend immediate hardware replacement and the addition of a warning label specifically prohibiting human interaction. The xenobiology department wanted Marcus's complete medical history, workout regimen, genetic profile, and a detailed explanation of what he meant by just like moving my couch because the lease was up and I couldn't afford movers. How heavy is human furniture? Why do they move it themselves? Do all humans have this level of applied problem-solving combined with complete disregard for the phrase "don't touch that"? The safety office began drafting new regulations at a speed that suggested they'd been personally attacked by the concept of human curiosity. Within 4 hours, there were 23 new rules. 17 mentioned human cadets specifically. 5 were just increasingly emphatic variations of no-touching calibration equipment. Commander Volthar sat in a chair, holding his head in 2 of his 6 hands, and spoke into his incident recorder. Time, 10:47. Cadet Trent has lifted the calibration anchor. Repeat, has lifted the anchor. He accomplished this by identifying a maintenance failure that somehow eluded 2 centuries of inspection protocols. When asked why he attempted this, he stated, and I quote, "I wanted to see if I was right about the fulcrum thing. He has no concept of what he's done. He thinks he helped. Note for file. Humans do not understand the difference between can do and should do. Recommend psychological evaluation. Also recommend never leaving humans unsupervised near structural fixtures." End recording. In the observation deck, Krell turned to Zixith. The human failed the strength test. Yes. By successfully solving an engineering problem. Yes. That no one knew existed. Apparently. I'm not sure if I'm impressed or terrified. Thune, ever practical. Both. Definitely both. Also, we should probably check if anything else in this facility is mounted wrong before a human notices. 6 months later, the Anchor sits in the Academy Museum of Institutional Learning Experiences. The plaque remains. Marcus Trent graduated with honors. His file includes notes like, useful in emergency situations, demonstrates unconventional problem solving, do not let him get bored near infrastructure. Seriously, keep him occupied or he starts fixing things. He went on to serve in the engineering corps, where he prevented 2 catastrophic structural failures, redesigned 3 impossible-to-improve systems, and once stopped a station decompression by noticing that a support beam looked kinda off. When asked how he keeps finding problems, he said, "I don't know, stuff just looks wrong sometimes. Like when you see a picture frame that's not level, you know? The galaxy does not. In fact, no. But the galaxy has learned to listen when a human says something looks wrong, because usually, they're right. And they'll prove it by lifting something that weighs 15 tons while everyone screams at them to stop." The calibration anchor's replacement has been inspected 47 times in 6. Every inspection confirms it's perfectly mounted. The inspection team just wants to be really, really sure. Before another human decides to check,